Thank you. Y'all give it up for this panel. I felt like we were on a couch at their house. We were so lucky to be invited into the home of Robert and Rich, so thank you so much. And I was back there listening as he was talking about connection is what allows for us to be everywhere. Okay, so don't go just yet, just yet. We've got one more dynamic panel. I promise you it's going to be extremely important. It's a conversation that so many of us have been talking about and curious about, and that is the future of work in the age of artificial intelligence or AI. And so I have three dynamic black women who are going to join me on stage. First, we have Dr. Knatokie Ford, who is a scientist, STEM innovator, and creative changemaker. We have Renee King, who is the founder of Fund Black Founders, and our moderator, Isa Watson, who's a software entrepreneur, data scientist, and research chemist. Please give it up.
Hi, everyone. I grew up in a black church, so I know that being the person between food and is not the best. So, we're gonna have a really dynamic conversation. I'm really excited about this panel, Future of Work, Artificial Intelligence, and Opportunities in Business for People of Color. And I just really want to highlight it first that this panel, very rare air here, all technologists, all scientists, all STEM, and we're all black women. So this conversation about AI has taken off very, very fast. I mean, faster than most people can actually spell it, right? But let's start with the future of work. But before we go there, Dr. Knatokie, how would you describe, if we want to level set and say, what is AI? How should we actually think about this in terms that we understand? How would you answer that?
Well, one thing I would say is to remind people that artificial intelligence depends on human intelligence. So we have to also be mindful of all the ways that human intelligence, that data, et cetera, are being mined and combined, and then how we're taking all of that, leveraging technology, and then devising a set of rules or algorithms that govern how that data and technology is used, and then how we use it for tools and services. So for me, the important thing to remember is that AI is dependent upon human intelligence, and to be mindful of how are we ensuring that Black intellect, people of color, are being a part of the process of developing these technologies that are shaping many industries, if not every industry.
So the inputs are really important, and they're just as dynamic as we are as humans. And if we wanted to back into that just a little bit more, Renee, talk about how you would define AI.
I know, so that's the thing that we have to think about. I think whenever, there's some of us who are way advanced where we understand all the different, the LLMs and the algorithms and compute, right? But we also have to understand that there's a huge majority of our community that doesn't understand all of that information. They don't know the terminology, they don't know what it is just yet. So I want to break it down because we know we also have viewers who are watching the live stream too, right? And people in here who may not know it too. If I was to break it down in the most layman's, this is how I tell it to my family, by the way. It is literally remember back in the day we had those big brown encyclopedias, you remember those? You had the whole collection, right? And then you'd have to go to that to go look for something. Then we progressed to, you could just Google it, right? We moved from that. Now, AI is the next evolution, or it is the current evolution of that, where it is the super encyclopedia, the super Googling it of all this data and information that it has in it, that it's been trained on, that it has for you. And not only does it have it, but then it's also so dynamic in how it can respond to you, your requests, right? It can be really detailed to, you give it a complex thing to do, whether it's to analyze your data or it's to create a hit song, viral hip hop song, whatever, that's gonna be a diss song or whatever. It can do all these different things using all of this information that it has been trained on.
I love that, and I think that simplicity is really important as it pertains to not just understanding AI, but being able to participate in the conversations effectively. When I started my career as a scientist, they always told us, if you can't really explain it to your grandma, who has no background in chemistry,
and you
don't really understand it.
I agree, and we also have to be really clear with our friends and family about these things and try to educate them, because the funny part, we said this during the panel, prepping for this, like, ChatGPT and Gemini, these are AI, right? They're using algorithms to do all this stuff. And it's so funny, I had an aunt who, she was like, I didn't know, that was AI. Like, all this time we've been talking about all these tools, and she didn't put the two and two together, but it's on us to, like, make sure we're landing it and really educating everyone about it to say, this is what this is.
Now, when we think about the future of work, the remix that I add to that, the paprika, the oregano, or whatever, is prosperity, right? Because work actually enables us to prosper. And in the spirit of this panel, we want to be positioned in a way where we're not left behind in these conversations and these opportunities. So, Dr. Ford, can you tell me a little bit about what you're excited about around kind of the future of work, #prosperity, and AI?
Yes, I love that question. So I'm excited about a few different things. And first and foremost, I'm excited about the possibility of merging AI with the power of story to help our kids iterate futures. So we know the future is not set in stone. And how do we help our kids envision futures where they can see themselves as innovators, as entrepreneurs, as people who are not just participating in the future, but actually being the ones to drive it and to create the future. And so the first part of that is it's important to be able to expose kids to that possibility so that they feel empowered. This actually builds upon some work that I did. I was a senior policy advisor in the Obama White House, and I had a project known as the Image of STEM. And it was all about how do we use the power of media and storytelling to change what the public perceives as what is a STEM job and who should be doing STEM jobs. And so bringing this all together, I'm so excited about the possibility of using story to iterate futures with our children where they can see themselves participating in ways that they may not have previously conceived, but also to think of it as a sort of a challenge for us to engage our collective imagination, to think about 20, 30 years from now, there are jobs that don't exist today that our kids will be doing. So how do we work with them to think about what are the skills we need for these futuristic jobs we don't have yet, and to make it more of a collaborative and a co-developed process so that kids can be even more excited about their present day learning experiences. It's not just important to prepare, but we also have to inspire kids.
When you talk about kids, I think about there's age diversity, there's black and brown and color diversity, experience diversity, and biases, because it's built on human intelligence, biases can kind of creep in, right? And so can you talk a little bit about, Renee, the ethical considerations we should be aware of, or any examples around just making sure that as we're developing these tools, that we are kind of ridding them of those biases?
So when I explain the whole point of that, AI is kind of this like super encyclopedia of all this data that it has, right? We have to and when you had mentioned how like there's human intelligence behind that, like who is feeding that information? Who is training the models? We have to think about who is the person or teams that are designing that, because it's mission critical as for what information they're putting in there, right? And what are they feeding it, and what are they telling it to like respond? So perfect example, during the time of the tragic death of George Floyd, I'll give you an example of this. I was using an AI tool to write a blog post about why it's really important to invest in Black entrepreneurs, right? And that's the work that I do. I'm very focused on funding Black entrepreneurs. So I'm writing this blog post with this AI tool, which I think it doesn't exist anymore, by the way. And the response that it gave me was that nobody wants to fund Black entrepreneurs because they're more likely to die. And that right there just should to let you understand who was feeding that model, who is behind the scenes, checking, doing quality assurance and playing with it to see like what type of response, even asking and prompting it questions around what would be questions that would be relative to what we would ask about. Who is doing that? That's really mission critical right now, is for like when we think about bias and equity of the AI tools that are being developed and coming to market.
Dr. Ford, what would you add to that around the ethical considerations?
Absolutely, there are a number of ethical considerations. So one, and bringing this to the realm of education and schools, when we think about these emerging tools that kids are being mandated to use in the classroom, there's no sort of permission or consent that they're able to give for how their data is being used to develop and to essentially help these companies profit from their data. So there's the first piece around consent in personal data, but also this idea around all the data that's being used to feed these tools is riddled with bias, it's riddled with stereotypes, it's racist. And so how are our kids being impacted by tools that are going to compound discrimination that they might be experiencing in schools? You know, we've heard these reports around things around facial recognition and how all of these different assets or aspects interface and converge when we think about technology in the classroom and contribute to an even further or even greater experience of like disciplinary actions against Black kids. So I think the ethical considerations are we have to be very persistent and very intentional in how we are addressing the ways that AI can perpetuate inequities in society, but specifically in learning.
And the thing about AI is that we can actually build it ethically while making money, right? And so I want to go to this number that's in my head, Renee, for whatever reason I can't think of it. $43 billion.
$43 billion.
$43 billion. Do you have that?
Yeah, I have that number.
Okay. All
That
right.
number, what we're talking about is, I don't know anyone who saw the McKinsey report on the wealth gap that's going to come from generative AI, right? The fact of that AI is going to expand the economy, and I think the number that they quoted was 7 trillion. But when you break it down as for how does that impact Black people, right, Black households, if we are not in it, right, if we are not building the solutions, right, if we are not upskilled for the jobs, the AI jobs that are coming, what the number that they literally said is that we are going to widen, in the year of 2045, we're going to widen the wealth gap between Black households and white households by 43 billion per year. That's wild. That amount is, our wealth gap is already crazy, and this is the trajectory that we're on. But I like to also think about it as that's $43 billion that's on the table that we need to go get. And how are we right now positioning ourselves and getting AI ready to go get that money? Because that's the other part, right? There's a tremendous amount of money that can be made from this.
Can I add something to that? So you're bringing up such a great point around access. And we haven't touched on it yet, but the digital divide in terms of access to digital technologies, high-speed, reliable internet access. And so in order for us to be able to capitalize on that opportunity, we have to also increase our access to things that even leverage AI. So I think this is another critical part of the conversation, is even increasing the access to AI, because this is going to be another way that kids and our communities are going to unfortunately be left out.
And we hear a lot of those words: access, education, equity, all these things, right? But one of the things that's one of the most important, I think, foundationally, is education, right? That education and exposure. And so when we look at this room of executives that have the power to implement things, to fund things, from an educational perspective, with this DEI blowback that we've had, how do we kind of chart forward and make sure that we are still developing equitable AI tools in this environment?
I think there's a couple parts to that, right? The first part, if you're an executive in an organization, and let's be transparent, not everyone has played with AI. You may feel intimidated by it. You may feel that it's over your head, or you may even feel like it's not in your wheelhouse of what you are responsible for doing, but it is, right? And I think what we can think about is you personally, within your positions, it's everybody's responsibility to get educated on AI immediately, right? That's one. And there are tools and resources, like I know Google right now just released, really basic, a nice essentials for AI, and it doesn't just focus on Google tools. It focuses on a whole bunch of tools. You can do it self-paced, so you don't have to feel, intimidated by it. Jump in and start doing that. But then you also want to think about now, looking at the people in your company, right, and whatever the work that they're doing. More than likely, they're probably going to start playing with AI tools. They're probably going to start building AI tools. So now you also need to be educated so that you can advocate in these rooms to make sure that the biases are not built in those tools. And another thing I would encourage you to do is then you also now need to meet our community where they are, right? To now relay the education on the AI and to also give more resourcing around that. So think about, what I like to think about, some examples of that is, finding there's a lot of programs that are going to come to you and ask for you to like fund them, whether you do nonprofit initiatives and things of that sort. Look for the ones that are doing the STEM education and like amplify it, right? Like put it up on your list. Like it should be, I think my overall point is like add AI to your strategy overall. Like it should be in every single thing, even if it's something that you do not touch, it's not in your wheelhouse of whatever you do, you need to add it in personally, add it in at the workspace, and then also be intentional around like what are you going to do to meet our community in different spaces to start also bringing AI to them.
And one of the things I want to add is the fact that you said earlier today, the experts are still learning. This is a field that is evolving so rapidly that none of us here are behind, even if you hadn't heard of the two letters before today, right? And so we talked about education. Can you talk a little bit about that experimentation?
Well, I think there's a couple things that I think that are important in this experimentation realm. And I'm a proponent of storytelling, so I'm going to always talk about narratives. It's also to really have more concerted efforts to address those narratives that constantly make people feel like they don't have the ability to opt in, to feel like they have to be at some level that they're not operating at. Or to also even think about the nefarious uses of AI that seem to prevail. We think about the robots are going to take over the world, and so there's a fear that those things engender in people about AI. So how do we be more specific in addressing those concerns? And so I think the other thing that I just wanted to actually add on that Renee mentioned was around this idea of going back to the education piece and to be very specific about thinking about who are those initial users that people have in mind when they develop these technologies. They're white, they're male, they're able-bodied, they're cisgender, they're heterosexual. And so be more intentional about pushing for those equity audits, but also co-developing with the users that aren't often even a consideration or a thought in someone's mind when these technologies are being developed. So be specific in that realm, be collaborative with developing with the communities, and then actually design for problems that people actually are facing and are dealing with. And so not just to be kind of philosophical and we're going to solve these issues with AI, but actually through that co-development process, design and use AI to actually help make the lived realities of these people better.
So we have education, we have experimentation, and I'll wrap it with action. I think that in these conversations, it's really important to have something tactical to leave with. And the spirit of what can we do? Dr. Ford, can you double click on that equity audit for a second and tell the folks like what you mean by that? Why is that important? Why should they take that to their companies?
Yeah, I think it's important to just not accept AI at face value, to recognize that it's not based in logic or reason, it's stochastic. So this machine is only going to operate based on the data that it's been fed. Which again, we've already mentioned, it's biased, it's racist, it's all these negative things that operate against us. And so with the equity audits, it's really being specific in scrutinizing what's been used to feed the LLMs, and then look at the outputs, and then also, again, work with the individuals who weren't at the table originally to inform the way that these could be utilized. And so with the equity audit is, again, looking at who was involved in the process to develop this, what was used, actually understanding the algorithms and things that are informing the way these tools work, and then being specific about how do we use other ways to retrain these machines in more equitable ways.
And the aspect there is like not just equity audit, like, hey, diversity is cool this year, so hey, I'm black and it's not cool this year, don't tell nobody I'm black. This needs to be something that's consistently part of the business strategy, as you mentioned. And then on the action part, you talked about playing with it, but what are some of the other things that companies can do, maybe bring in outside voices and things of that nature?
I think a couple, just so you know, like Fund Black Founders, we are part of the second cohort of Google Black Founders Fund. And what that resulted in was that they poured into us a lot of resourcing. And I'm sharing that because they also just announced a new group of black entrepreneurs who are building in AI that they selected, and they're funding them with $150K plus also $100K of crowd credits and also an AI mentor. Like, this is what I mean by like taking action within your companies to say, I'm gonna meet I'm gonna meet these communities, these marginalized communities where they are specifically, and like help. Like these are founders on the ground right now who they want to build AI tools and services and products that are more reflective for us, but the building part requires a lot of resourcing. And we're in a climate, I know you all were here during Fearless Fund, the lawsuit, we're in a climate where there's a major pullback. So we're in a pullback, plus AI takes a lot of resources to build. So we have to be mindful of like making sure we go into the community and do fund initiatives like that. Also partner with companies too. The work that we do focuses on, like I said, funding Black entrepreneurs, and how we do it, it's a mix of, we have a crowdfunding platform, we also have some celebs and athletes and foundations who also match what founders raise on there. So in Boston, we are launching a cohort with Drew Holiday, who's a Boston Celtics champion, and Google was helpful to come in and start doing some AI trainings for the small businesses in Boston, small Black businesses with us to come like, can you come and like, let's share your resources on top of what we're resourcing too. So this is the part where I'm talking about, we have to meet our folks where they are and start implementing things and showing them the wild ideas and aspects that they can start thinking of with AI in their businesses and AI tools that they could even design themselves.
And one of the things, last things I want to add is the importance of public-private partnerships. So I actually run a software company as well, and we stood up a AI partnership with MIT and have a really strong collaboration with the MIT Media Lab, also another Celtics guy is a big part of that. And you know, the thing about these academic organizations is that they're set up to experiment, to do the theory, and all the things that we may not necessarily have the answers for as it pertains to, well, what's the ROI on this? And so when you partner with these organizations, it becomes a very easy way to kind of explore, to make sure that we're kind of getting ahead and not falling behind.
And I'll add another to that point. There's another colleague that I love who, her name is Chanel Hardy. And one of the things, I'm sharing this example. If you're an executive in an organization, right, and AI seems like it's like this wild thing, like what, I don't even know where to get started. You do not have to know the answers yourself, right? Like, don't. One of the approaches that I like about what she does with her work is she has aligned a group of people who don't even work at Google, right? It's a group of us, and it's a wide industry. There are influencers, there are founders, there are people who work on the Hill, a range of different folks of different cultural backgrounds who she can go to say, hey, this is what we're thinking. What do y'all think? Hey, come learn about Gemma. Come learn about this. Test it, do it, to play it. And then we like yell back. We do. We yell back and say, maybe do this. So think about that in your positions too, as for like another way that you can research. You do not have to have the answers, but you can get a diverse group of folks that surround you to like play with things, to give you the feedback that you need to grow this together.
Thank you. So again, don't want to hold us up from the food, but we leave you with, you know, the fact that this is important. Don't let it kind of go by the wayside. The future of work, think about work as our ability to prosper. And again, those three things is educate yourself and others, take the time to experiment, and then take the action. And this time next year, I expect for us to be talking about not how we prevent that $43 billion gap, but then since we're now caught up, then how do we kind of move further, right? And so with that, thank you all very much.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, what a dynamic panel. You can go that way. Thank you all so much. Give it up for our panel. I know I'm standing between you all and lunch, so I want to make one quick announcement about some of the things that the Global Black Economic Forum is up to. They have launched a board accelerator program to ensure that the pipeline to a diverse boardroom includes people like you all. So while you are outside getting your lunch, you can stop by the booth and hear more about the accelerator program. And I have to be very clear. Be back in here at 1:15 as we continue on in the afternoon, and we have a special conversation with House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who is the first Black elected in that position. You don't want to miss it. Thank you.